first, it's my pleasure to talk with Richard Paul Evans. He's the author of The Christmas Box, one of the biggest best-selling books from the last decade, and the brand new book called The Looking Glass, which has already hit the top 10 bestseller list. And Richard, thanks so much for being with us today.
Glad to be with you. Thank you.
And Richard, what a phenomenon this has been. You have over 10 million books in print. Huge bestseller with The Christmas Box. Just year after year, it seems to come back. People continue to buy it. And this is all from a gentleman who 10 years ago had no clue that this was going to happen to him, right?
Not at all. And it's still amazing to me. Last night, people were buying like 20 copies of The Christmas Box, and it's like this book's been out for 6 years.
I mean, don't you sometimes just pinch yourself and go, this is unbelievable. It's almost like I'm in a dream.
Well, it feels that way, especially when you wake up in a strange hotel room somewhere.
Tell us about your background before we get into talking about your books.
I'm a father. I have 5 children, and live in Salt Lake City. And before I was a writer, I was in advertising, wrote radio commercials. And you had asked before the show if I had ever wanted to be a writer. I love to write. I never really believed in such a competitive field I would ever have a chance to be a writer and to do it for a living. So I feel really grateful.
But as a radio writer, that's quite a different style from writing literary works.
You know, it is. I think, though, some of the things I learned there are really important. I learned to cut right to the chase,
right.
With 30 seconds. And the other thing is that when you're writing advertisements, no one really wants to see what you're writing. I mean, advertising is an accidental encounter. In some way you have to keep people's attention. And so I think some of the things I learned, I get bored really easily. And so in my writing, I try to keep it very compelling, or else I get bored with my own writing.
Yeah, that explains your book. I read The Looking Glass, this top 10 bestseller right now all across America. The Looking Glass, when I was done with it, I thought this is a very lean book from a standpoint of you get right to the point. When a dramatic element occurs, you don't spend 5 or 6 pages developing this thing. You get right to the point and move on. There's an awful lot happening because you jam so much into those pages, and I appreciated that because I don't like it to, go on and on and on and on over an incident. And that must come from your radio background then.
Well, maybe, or maybe it's just my short attention
span.
No, but I mean, I know what I like to read. I like to read my own books, and that may sound kind of funny, but because my books, I do try to keep them very, very interesting and moving, so you're always being drawn in some direction. And it's just, I like Steinbeck. I think Steinbeck's my favorite author, and I think he does that, and I think I've tried to pattern myself after that.
Now, I read that in your background you also were a clay animator.
Yeah.
Isn't that very tedious, boring work?
That's extremely tedious.
That's where you sit and you take a clay figure and move it just a little smidgen every few frames or something?
Yeah, it's like meditation almost. It's people used to say, "Oh, I want to come see what you're doing, your animation." It's like, well, why don't you just sit down and watch the grass grow? It's about as fast.
So how can a person with a short attention span do that kind of job?
I'm multifaceted. That was interesting. It was almost trance-like when I would when I would animate. I'd get into a different realm. That's a good question.
So what's your favorite job that you've had of all these things that you've done?
Oh, writing.
Current job, current type of writing?
Yeah, I really enjoy what I'm doing now.
Richard, let's start out by talking about The Christmas Box. I had never read it before this week. Apparently from the background, you wrote this for your children and then started to go out and try to sell it.
Yeah, I was 29 years old at the time. I just wanted to write something for my then 2 girls. And, when I had these little girls come into my life, they just changed my life. They really taught me what love was, and I just adore my children. And so I wanted to write something that would kind of capture this feeling, because I was filled with that excitement of a new father. And that's when I wrote The Christmas Box. And when I started to write, it was really amazing, because I didn't know what to expect, really. I wasn't sure what the story I was going to write. And then the story just started to flood into my mind, and it would wake me up in the middle of the night. It just obsessed me, and it was as if it was very external, like the story was being given to me. And I remember when I finished it, I had this really strong sense that there was more to this story, that there was another purpose, and I really believe it was a gift. If you believe in spiritual things, I believe it's a gift from my sister. My sister died when I was 2 years old. And at one point I finished it, and I felt her presence. And I remember saying, Sue, you gave me this book for Mom, And because I realized as I was nearing the completion that this book was about the pain my mother felt over losing a child. And it came to me in a very strong sense, dedicate this book to me. And that's why the Christmas box was dedicated to Sue.
So in a way, this was your attempt to help your family deal with that, maybe in a subconscious way?
Maybe, yeah. And the thing is, at the time, I didn't have any plans to even share it with my family. After I had this experience, I knew I needed to share it with them. And that's when I first went out to Kinko's and made up 20 copies. And that's when I decided to give it out as Christmas gifts. And when I handed out 20 copies, I was really pleased. I thought, wow, I set out to make 2 books. I had 20 in print. Wow, I'm kind of an author. In the next few weeks, those 20 copies were read hundreds of times, and bookstores start calling with orders for this unpublished book. And that's when I realized that there's something bigger here than I knew. I sent it out to publishers, and they all rejected it. But I was receiving so many calls year-round, and from strangers. The book had been passed on, and so I self-published, and within 6 weeks, it became the best-selling book in the state of Utah, where I'm from.
And this was all from self-publishing.
This was from self-publishing. The next year, we brought it out national, my wife and I, a self-published book, and it just exploded nationally. I mean, it was a very difficult time, and we took some great risks. But by Christmas of '94, we hit number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list, and that was only being in 20% of the bookstores in the country.
Wow.
So we were selling such quantities through those, 20% of the bookstores. At that point, the entire publishing world kind of descended on me. I'm getting multi-million-dollar offers over the telephone, and I'm here in my little home in Salt Lake City, and just kind of blown away by all this.
And then by '95, after you got a major publisher to back it, it was number 1 the same week on the hardcover and the paperback list.
Yes.
And that's the only book that's ever happened.
Never done that to you, yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. How could you summarize, let's just take a few sentences and summarize what the Christmas box is about?
Christmas box is about the love of a father for his daughter, or a parent for a child. It's about a young family that move in with a widow and the Christmas they spend with her. But the deeper message there is about the eternal nature of the love of a parent for a child, and that's what people are gravitating to.
Mm-hmm.
And it impacts people in ways that's more powerful than I can even explain. I get letters from people telling me they brought their families back together. People talk to their father they haven't talked to in 20 years. People write and tell me it's taken away pain that they've had for decades. It's really amazing.
The major story deals with a woman who has lost a child, and yet my feeling at the end of the book was that the real story here was a workaholic young man who wasn't spending enough time with his children learned from the woman who had lost her child. Is that the ultimate goal for you, to say to workaholic fathers, stop, take some time, realize it's going to go very quickly, and you could lose your kid at any moment?
Absolutely. There's 2 ways to lose a child. You can lose a child in death. And see, I didn't even, as the book came to me, I didn't even consider that side, really, because I had never lost a child. I didn't understand it.
Right.
But I had come close to losing my child through being a workaholic.
Sure.
And I made a decision at a young age to stop, to slow down, and to cherish the time with her.
So you were a workaholic at one point.
Yeah.
So this is really your story.
Yes.
You even use your name in this book. It surprised me you use your name, your wife's name, your child's name. So this is really your story.
Well, yeah, and people ask me why I did that. It's like, because it was only for the 3 of us. You know what I mean? It's like it was a book for our family.
Right.
And then it started to spread, and then I really saw no reason to change it. I didn't know it was going to be an international bestseller. So it's, I just... There's no point along the line where I said, well, let's change all the names here. And in fact, it really didn't hit me how strange that was until I saw the TV movie.
Yeah.
And here you have John Boy Walton, Richard.
Playing you.
Richard, Carrie, come here. Let's put Jenna to bed. It's like, this is us. Oh, my gosh, the Evans family.
So now you travel the country. My question, I guess, is you obviously are away from your kids a good part of the year then, promoting the book. Are you still fulfilling that desire to spend time with them, or are you now just a workaholic writer?
The great irony. That's a good question. We balance. It's about balance. And, for instance, my kids go with me on part of the tour. I was with them in Beverly Hills, and we found time to sneak Disneyland in last week.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked them into the scene. And I've had some really great one-on-one time taking my kids with me on tour and meeting my wife. It's a little bit harder this year because we just had 2 babies.
Wow.
And so we're a little bit landlocked. So, but we make it work. Overall, I get to work at home, and I spend more time with my children. And spending time with children isn't an obligation. It's a joyful thing.
Right.
And especially now that my daughter Jenna is a teenager. But she's one of my best friends. We get along really well, and that's a real blessing.
Well, there I see you. I think you're in Ladies' Home Journal this month, aren't you? In the December issue of Ladies' Home Journal.
Yes, and by the way, those are not all our ornaments.
Oh, come on. I thought, wow, what a house they've got.
What a house. Any real parent's going to look at that and say, wait a second, they have 3 kids under 4 years old. There's no way they're going to have a house like that.
That's right. Right now, Richard Paul Evans, he's the author of The Christmas Box and The Looking Glass. He has over 10 million copies of his books in print. And, Richard, I think you were saying that last year you sold more books than Stephen King. Is that right?
Last Christmas.
Last fall. Isn't that amazing?
It is. I was concerned that my novel last year, The Locket, didn't do as well as the novel before. And I called my publisher and I said, well, am I down in sales? And they laughed. I said, you're our number one author now. They said, the thing is we released 7 books last year, and so we were, I was competing with myself. Yeah.
And you have a brand new book out called The Looking Glass. It's already on the top 10 list, and man, I can't believe how fast it went to the top 10 list.
It's the first time I've had a book hit the first partial week out. The first 3 days out, it hit the New York Times immediately.
Now, is this the type of thing where you feel every year you have to have a book out in October that's ready for Christmas sales because you kind of are now the king of Christmas books?
That's what New York Times says.
Right.
More so for my readers. The readers expect that.
So is that a real pressure on you?
Yeah, it is. But everyone has pressures. It's my job, and so I keep at it. And if you look at Daniel Stills, he's doing like 2 books a year sometimes.
Right. But writers, very often they talk about writer's block and how they have to be inspired to write a story. Well, if you're under contract to get this book out by October, the inspiration just comes from that contract, I guess.
Unfortunately, I work that way. I was the kind of guy that did really well just before the test.
Mm-hmm.
I work well under pressure.
Yeah. Now, The Looking Glass is a book about a minister who essentially has a great loss in his life and comes to, I guess, turn his back on God. Is that the right way to put it?
He
really questions. He questions his faith. Yeah.
Well, I don't know so much he questions as he's bitter.
Right.
He doesn't deny God. He's just mad at God.
And so through a course of events, and I can't get into all of them, another woman comes into his life, and he learns again to have faith. And I think I've seen in your books an underlying desire to promote faith. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, there is.
And why?
I think, the greatest insights that I've had in my life have been spiritual insights. And that's the underlying message. Mm-hmm. That's why it's kind of hard to pick the genre my books are, because they're inspirational.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very strong belief in God. I didn't always. But I have a tremendous belief in God, and seeing how things work in my life, I think it's important that we identify those spiritual forces so that we can have the spiritual evolution each of us needs, mm-hmm. so that we can become better people and that we can love more fully.
Are readers looking for spiritual works?
Yeah, they are. And from the letters, like in the case of The Looking Glass, I'm getting more mail now than I've ever had. I get up to 150 letters a day.
Wow.
And this isn't even my busy season, technically. It's like we get closer to Christmas, that will triple or quadruple. And they're grateful to have something that, when they're done with the book, they feel stronger and better. Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's not preachy. You read it. It's a novel.
Oh, right.
And they're love stories. But so often the spiritual nature of love is taken out of love stories, and they become kind of trashy. Mm-hmm. I think the most alluring, if you will, or sexy thing is spiritual. Mm-hmm. Is that the love between two people is ultimately a spiritual experience.
Yeah, I saw that in your book. It wasn't the physical coming together; it was really the spiritual bond that was very alluring. You also, in your books, mention angels at times. I know the Christmas box, of course, mentions angels. You believe in angels, then, obviously.
I do.
And you now have an angel, some type of an angel monument that people come and visit every December 6th based on the Christmas box?
Right. In fact, these angel monuments are spreading throughout the country.
Tell us about that.
Well, in at the heart of the Christmas box is this angel monument, and it's not so much an angel as it is a gravestone where this woman comes to visit her lost child. What I found is that people were coming to Salt Lake City to find the angel, and not just out of curiosity. Many were coming on almost a Mecca, people who had lost their children looking for a place to heal. There was an angel statue at one time, and it was destroyed about 10 years ago in a flood.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the statue rebuilt early on, and what I could not have imagined is that this statue would become really a Mecca for thousands of people. Like year-round, it is covered with flowers. People come from all around the world to see it. And but also the angel itself is spreading. People have come to me and asked if they can make replicas in their own communities. And right now there are 9 of them, and there's 29 ordered. And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, it's for people who, especially that have miscarriages or stillborn children.
So it essentially represents people who have lost children.
Yes, and that don't have a place to go.
But I think you made an excellent point earlier in the show, and I got this out of your book, too. There are really 2 ways to lose a child. One is the physical loss. The other is what?
The other is turning our backs on our children by losing childhood. And I try to remind people the only promise of childhood is that it will end.
Right. Well, they're fascinating books, and I can see why you're a bestseller. It's just been a pleasure to talk with you. You're a very tender-hearted guy, and I can see that in your books. And a good message. I appreciate that strong, inspirational message.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this.